Belgravia, the next chapter episode 3's beginning mentioned a really existing historical event, although the period drama went as far as showing only how its aftermath impacted Dr. Stephen Ellerby and his friends. With its central events focusing on the Trenchard household and how their secrets from Julian Fellowes' Belgravia still impacted the youngest Trenchards in 1871, Belgravia, the next chapter didn't manage to show much of the historical period. Only the focus on members not from the upper classes caused Belgravia, the next chapter, to show more of the historical period's happenings in parts of Dr. Ellerby's story. The lack of clear historical references until Belgravia, the next chapter episode 3 makes the sequel stand out compared to Belgravia, whose starting point firmly set up the story mere days before the Battle of Waterloo, which greatly influenced the Trenchards' fortunes and future. While Frederick's family issues and his marriage partly riddled with difficulties to Clara still took much of the focus of episode 3, Dr. Ellerby and Annie Harper's escapades helping out protesters linked Belgravia, the next chapter, to a tumultuous period in Victorian England when Londoners fought and won a fight against landowners over London's biggest forest. The Wanstead Flats Rally saved Epping Forest, Indiana, London in 1871. Edward Blumel as Dr. Stephen Ellerby in Belgravia, the next chapter episode 3-1. Between the 1600s and the 1900s, parliamentary enclosure acts made it possible for common land to become private, prompting enclosures in almost half of all English countryside. The Commons Preservation Society, precursor of one of the oldest UK charities, Open Spaces Society, had fought for years against enclosures built around Epping Forest before 1871. However, a new enclosure materializing over the southernmost part of Epping Forest, ordered by the Lord of Wanstead Manor Earl Cowley, fired up East Londoners, thousands of whom marched to the demonstration against the enclosures in Wanstead Flats on July 8, 1871, via layers of London. London's exponential growth thanks to commerce and industry in the second half of 1800 made the green areas around the metropolis attractive to developers who could build houses for the many more people inhabiting the city, but that also meant a reduction of green spaces available for the public. The Wanstead Flats Rally galvanized East Londoners also because the City of London Corporation, the governing body for the area around the square mile, sided with them, with there being Epping Forest commoners giving them the chance to bring a legal case against the lords of manors of the Epping Forest. As Belgravia, the next chapter episode 3 detailed, there were clashes between the police and the Wanstead Flats Rally demonstrators, but the demonstration also brought attention to what was only the latest enclosure violating the commoners' rights, via Open Spaces Society. The Corporation of London eventually won the case against the Lords of the Manors, leading to the 1878 Epping Forest Act, which appointed them as the conservators of Epping Forest, via Epping Town Council, stopped the enclosures, and legally declared for the first time that the public had the right to use open space for leisure in Britain. The Right to Roam movement started in the 1870s and it's still protected in real life today. Edward Blumel as Stephen Ellerby, Harriet Slater as Clara Trenchard, and Elaine Cassidy as Davison in Belgravia, the next chapter episode 3. Many outdoor societies were created in the 19th century, including the Hayfield and Kinderscout Ancient Footpaths Association in 1876. This society in particular led the Kinderscout mass trespass in the Peak District in 1932, which increased support for ramblers and eventually led to the Access to the Mountains Act being passed in 1939, prohibiting landowners from stopping walkers on their lands during daylight hours, via Peak District National Park Authority. With their creation, the Right to Roam movement was born, and the right is still protected nowadays, granting people access to parts of private land to use in specific ways. The biggest changes Belgravia, the next chapter, makes to the real historical riots. Episode 3's focus on some new Belgravia, the next chapter characters gave the drama the chance to show the interests and activities of those who weren't part of the upper classes nor among their servants. While the focus of Richard's conversation with Ellerby and Annie soon shifted to Stephen's more than friendly interest in Clara Trenchard, the mention of the Wanstead Flats Rally still cemented Belgravia, the next chapter's place in a specific time of upheaval, which might potentially also impact Frederick in the future, and which put Dr. Stephen Ellerby in direct opposition with Frederick's interests in more than one way. Belgravia, the next chapter episode 3's description of the Wanstead Flats Rally was generally faithful, highlighting both its legitimacy and the probability that the press would have turned against the protesters, which happened in reality. However, part of the press also highlighted the public's rightful frustration with the government for not protecting public spaces from landowners, showing that the press wasn't a monolith like as Belgravia, the next chapter suggested. Moreover, historical records don't mention concussed workmen being saved from arrest as Ellerby recounted, hinting at Belgravia, the next chapter embellishing the story to present Ellerby as a hero.